and I have the pleasure today of introducing Gabriel Rivière. He will speak about Poincaré series and linking of legendary knots. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for your invitation, and I hope that everyone can see what is on the screen. And of course, please do not hesitate to interrupt me all along the talk if you have questions or comments. Okay, so this is a joint work with Nguyen Viet Dong, who is now in Université Paris-Sorbonne, and it is about Poincaré series. So this is a classical topic in Riemannian geometry, and I will explain how tools from dynamical system and microlocal analysis can be used to study this kind of questions. Okay, and I will make connection with what is called the linking of knots, and so there will be some sense two parts in my talk. One more analytical related to Poincaré series, and then I will establish the connection with this kind of objects. Okay, so let me begin. So just for the sake of simplicity, I will restrict myself to a kind of simpler problem rather than giving the most general statement. So the problem is the following. So I'm on a compact, smooth Riemannian surface. So here I insist that all my talk will be in dimension 2. So my surface has no boundary and it has a negative curvature. And a priori, the curvature is non-constant. Okay, so the question is the following. You take one point on your surface, another point, and you look at the geodesics that go from C1 to C2. Okay, and you suppose that the geodesics are parameterized by arc length, for instance. And so you have one in red here, one in green. And what you want to do is to count the number of geodesics that go from C1 to C2 of length less than t. Okay, so this is so I formulate this. The set of geodesics from C1 to C2 will be denoted by P of C1, C2. And what I want to do is to count these geodesics and to associate some zeta function to the length of this geodesic. So let me explain what is known about that. So it's an old story, as you probably most of you knows. So it started with the work of Delsart in 42, and then Huber in 59, and finally Margulis in 69. And what these people proved is the following, is that there exists some positive constant, A of C1 and C2, such that if you want to count the number of geodesic arcs of length less than t that goes from C1 to C2, then it behaves like A of C1, C2 times some exponential factor, exponential of t times h top. So h top is what is called the topological entropy of your surface. Okay, and if you do not know what is a topological entropy, it's not a big deal because you can take this as a definition. Okay, so you can say, okay, this is the definition for topological entropy. This is the growth of a number of geodesics going from C1 to C2. And this number is independent of C1 and C2. Okay, and this is a positive number. Okay, and in constant curvature, h top is equal to 1. Okay, so this behaves like exponential of t. Okay, so this is a classical problem. And the main difference between the works of Delsart, Huber, and Margulis is that Delsart and Huber, they worked in a constant negative curvature, while Margulis worked in a variable negative curvature. So the main input of Margulis was to extend, using different ideas, this asymptotic expression to variable negative curvature. Okay, so let me be more precise. So the proof of Delsart and Huber, it was related to the spectral decomposition of the Laplacian. So they connect this question to a problem on the Laplacian, and they obtain the asymptotic formula using this connection with the Laplacian. And the main novelty of Margulis was to use the mixing property of the geodesic flow. Okay, so in variable curvature, the main novelty in the work of Margulis was to say, okay, there is a way to connect this problem to what is called nowadays the Bowen-Margulis measure and its mixing properties. Okay, and so in all my talk, I will not use the approach of Delsart and Huber in the sense that I will work in variable curvature. And so I will have to rely on the properties of the geodesic flow. Okay, so this is really all what I will explain in this talk will be in variable negative curvature. And if you want to know more information, so as you can imagine, when you are in mathematics, you works with this kind of function. You want to count something, you want to have some estimate on the remainder and so on. And this is some subject that have been studied a lot. And there is a very beautiful survey by Parkkonen and Paulin on this topic, so published in the LMS lecture notes. And you can have a look at it if you want to know more. And so in my talk, I will not discuss at all the behavior of the remainder. Okay, so I have this asymptotics. I could have asked about the size of the remainder, but this will not be my concern. And I will rather focus on the properties of what are called Poincaré series. So this Poincaré series, as you will see in a minute, these are zeta function associated to this length spectrum. Okay, so I will not say more about this asymptotic behavior, and I will focus on what is called the Poincaré series. Okay, so let me explain what is a Poincaré series. Okay, so you, as before, you fix C1 and C2, 2 points. You fix a spectral complex number, S, and you want to put a weight on your, before I was taking S equal to 0, I was counting the number of geodesics of length less than T between C1 and C2, and now I put some weight exponential of minus S L gamma. So this is a well-defined function, and thanks to the Margulis theorem, you know that this series, that when you take T that tends to infinity, and I will denote this n infinity of C1, C2, S, this function is holomorphic in the half plane where the real part of W is larger than the topological entropy. Okay, so this is just a natural zeta function that you can associate to your length spectrum. And what I want to discuss today is the properties of this zeta function. So the main properties I will be interested in is about meromorphic continuation, so meaning trying to go beyond the threshold real part of W larger than topological entropy. And then I want to discuss some special values of this function, and more specifically, the value at 0 of this function. Okay, so this will be, so this is the object of my talks, speaking about this kind of series associated with the geodesic that go from C1 to C2. In fact, I could be more general, but I think I will not have time to discuss about that. I will see in the end, so I keep to this simple case where I go from one point to another. Okay, so let me state the theorem before trying to give you some hints about the proof and related works. Okay, so you fix 2 points. You denote by chi of x the Euler characteristic of the surface. So it means if 2 minus 2 g of x, where g of x is the genus. Okay, so this is the number of all on your surface. And so what I will try to explain is that this map has a meromorphic continuation to the whole complex plane. Okay, so this is the first step. So I remind you that it is well defined for the real part of S larger than the topological entropy. And then after showing that, I want to discuss the value at 0 of this function. As for instance, if you think about usual zeta function for the Laplacian or Riemann zeta function, you want to look at special value like at S equal to 0 and to see what you can find at this special value. And here, this is what we find. We find that if C1 is not equal to C2, then the value at 0 of this Poincaré series is 1 over the Euler characteristic. And if C1 is equal to C2, because I did not take the geodesics of length 0 that go from C1 to C2, I have to take a -1 here, but this is the same result. Okay, so this is what I want to talk about today, is this result. Okay, so there are mostly two parts. One part is about showing the meromorphic continuation of some function, and then the other part is trying to see what is going on at s equal to 0, and to see that it is related to topological invariant. Okay, so I hope that the statement is clear. And so if you have any question, you feel free to interrupt me.
So I actually have a question, but it's clearly naive at this point. The definition for your this Poincaré series is very reminiscent for me of the definition of the heat trace for Laplace eigenvalues. Is there any relationship between?
So yes, it's related. For the data function for the Laplacian, you would take lambda to the power -s, where lambda is the eigenvalue of the Laplacian. So I'm not 100% sure that there is exactly a connection between the two functions. At least if you are in variable curvature, I don't think so. But it's the same kind of question if you want. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so just yeah.
This is Dima. So if C1 equals C2, you look at geodesic loops, right?
Yes, I'm looking at geodesic loops, and the only difference is that because I did not take the geodesic of length 0, I have this difference of -1. Okay, so but this is geodesic loops, so it means that you do not come back with the same velocity at the point C1. You do not necessarily come back with the same velocity. Okay, so about comments, and let me just say that in the case of constant curvature, I think you can recover this result using the relation with the Laplacian. At least for the meromorphic continuation, I'm quite confident that it can be recovered from the works of Huber, even if I do not read German, so and the article is in German, but I guess he proves the meromorphic continuation. And for the special value at 0, probably it can be dig out from his paper, but let me insist that this paper is about a variable negative curvature. So it's really a result that is valid without any assumption on the curvature.
Gabriele, maybe one more silly question. So if you have like, instead of 2 points, you have 2 submanifolds.
Yes, maybe I will come to that at the end if you.
Okay.
Because yes, we can say something if, for instance, you take 2 curves and you want to look at the geodesic that go from one curve to another, but it's more complicated to state, and I prefer to focus on just 2 points, which is easier.
Right.
But if I have time at the end, I will explain what about more general submanifold. But that's natural question. Yes. Okay, and about still about constant curvature, there is a very nice formula that do not use at all the connection with the Laplacian, but only what is called the Cohery formula, and it is due to Paternin. And he proved in 2000 that if you integrate the truncated Poincaré series over the surface, so meaning about along the C1 variable and C2 variable, and then you take the limit as t tends to infinity, you found that this is equal to 4 pi square chi of x1 divided by 1 minus s square. Okay, and you can check using Gauss-Bonnet formula that this is consistent with our result. Okay, and finally, one important thing I would like to mention is that here I'm not discussing about closed geodesic, but there are of course similar results when you want to look at closed geodesic. And for closed geodesic, the classical function to look at is the real zeta function. And what this real zeta function does is that it counts the periodic orbits. So it means the geodesic that come back to themselves, but with the same velocity. Okay, and you do not fix a point. You just look at closed geodesic. And this goes back to the work of Selberg, Smale, Ruel, Hug, Fried. So all these people did this, let's say, in the analytic category. And more recently, let's say in the last 10 years or 20 years, there were works dealing with a more general dynamical system that are not necessarily analytic. And I would like to mention the works of Giuletti, Liverani, Policott, and Dyatlov-Zvorsky, who prove exactly the same kind of results. So what they prove is that this real zeta function, they have a meromorphic continuation to the whole complex plane. And also in the works, there are a second work by Dyatlov and Zvorsky where they show that for the real zeta function, the value at 0 also have a specific topological content related to the Euler characteristic. And so, of course, this kind of questions are related, and we will use a similar strategy as these people, but in some sense it's different. Okay, but it's not exactly the same thing because we are not looking at the same kind of geodesic, but you have similar result for periodic orbits. And you also have more general zeta function for periodic orbits, like in the work of Faure and Tsuji, and for more general dynamical system by Dyatlov, Guillermo, which are called axiom A flows. Okay, but I will not enter the details, but you have to keep in mind that there are similar results for periodic orbits, except even if the functions are slightly different, and you can obtain similar things. Okay, but the spirit is people who knows will see the difference, but the ideas are in some sense close. Okay, so if there are no questions, I will try to explain you the proof of this result. So I hope the statement again is clear, and I will try to convince you without getting into too much details that we can get this meromorphic continuation. And of course, if you want to prove meromorphic continuation of some function like this, you have to find a way to rewrite it in a different way. Let's say for real zeta function, you have to relate it to some spectral determinant and show that the spectral determinant has a meromorphic continuation. And here it's similar. We will try to rewrite the Poincaré series in a different way using some operator, and to show that proving the meromorphic continuation of Poincaré series is equivalent to show the meromorphic continuation of some resolvent for some operator that I will define in a couple of slides. Okay, so this is the strategy is to rewrite this Poincaré series in terms of spectral data, if you want. Okay, so let me explain. So what I do is that I denote the geodesic flow by phi of t. So here S star of x is just the unit cotangent bundle to the surface. So it's a three-dimensional manifold, sorry. And so to every point in x, I can associate a curve, which is S C star of x. So this is the set of points C and P that belongs to the cotangent bundle with P of norm 1. Okay, so to every point C in X, I can associate a curve in S star of X, so a one-dimensional curve in this three-dimensional space. Okay, so this, and so when I lift everything to the unit cotangent bundle, the advantage is that I can reformulate what I'm looking for, is that if I have a geodesics that go from C1 to C2, it means that there is a velocity vector P1 in SC1 star of X, some P2 in SC2 star of X, such that if you take the image by the flow at time L gamma of C1 P1, you end up with on C2 P2. Okay, so this is just exactly the same thing as before, except that now I'm formulating things in the unit cotangent bundle, where I will be able to use the dynamics of the geodesic flow. Okay, so let me just show you a picture. So what I'm doing is that I want to start from a point C1. So here, at the beginning of the cylinder, you have the curve SC1 star of X, which are all the cotangent vector above C1. And so when I push this curve by the geodesic flow, so it gives me some blue cylinder. So at every time t, I have a curve which is phi of t of SC1 star of X up to some time capital T. And what I want to look for is the points where this blue cylinder intersect the red curve SC2 star of X. And every time the blue cylinder will hit the red curve, it will correspond to a geodesic that goes from C1 to C2. And what you see in green is a geodesic, and its length is exactly the quantity that I use to define my Poincaré series. Okay, so this is, and so the strategy is to put this picture into a calculation. Okay, so I want to reformulate, to rewrite my Poincaré series using this picture. Okay, so what I want to do is to say, okay, I have this blue cylinder, which is in some sense a surface, which may be complicated, but a surface. And I have this red curve, and I want to look at the intersection points between this blue surface and this red curve. And so what I want to do is to intersect, if you want, these two surfaces, and to count +1 every time I have an intersection point. Okay, and so what I want is to look at the time where the first curve, SC1 of star of X, when you push it under the flow, it intersects the red curve. Okay, so I hope that this picture is clear. So, and I want to turn this picture into some calculation. Okay, that will be useful to make this meromorphic continuation. Okay, so of course, again, you feel free to stop me if you have any question. Okay, so what I will do now is that I will make this a calculation. So I want to intersect two surfaces in terms a surface and a curve via a calculation. So I want to intersect the blue current with the red current. Okay. Okay, so now I fix a one form, and I remind you that if you have a one form, you can integrate it over this curve, this is a one-dimensional curve, SC star of X. You can integrate psi along this curve. And I will denote this by SC star of X between bracket wedge psi. So this is a current of integration. So this is a differential form, a two differential form with values, with the coefficients that are a distribution, if you want. And so what I want to write is I want to express, so phi t of SC star of X, which is the curve that is pushed under the flow at time capital T. And I want to say that in some sense, this curve is equal to SC star of X plus the blue cylinder. Okay, so let me do that. So I write the fundamental theorem from analysis. So I say that phi of minus T star of SC star of X, so the pullback of this current, is equal to SC star of X minus the integral from 0 to T, the derivative of this function. And so the derivative, you have to take here the Lie derivative, so along the geodesic vector field V. Okay. Now you apply what is called the Cartan formula. So Cartan formula tells you that LV is d iota V plus iota V d. Okay, and what you can see here is that d, it commutes with the pullback from a basic differential geometry course. And then you apply d to a closed curve. So this term here is 0. Okay, so when you put the Cartan formula, this term will cancel, and you end up with something like that. You end up with the fact that the curve which is at the end of my blue cylinder is equal to the curve which is at the beginning of my blue cylinder minus d of something. And this d of something, it just represents the fact that these two curves are the boundary of this blue cylinder. Okay. And so it's just a simple calculation using a Cartan formula. And what I'm saying here is that this integral from 0 to t of iota v, the pullback by the flow of SC star of x, this is just the current of integration along the blue cylinder. And the previous calculation told you that if you take d of this, it was equal to this minus this. Okay. And so now what I want to do to count the geodesic that intersect the point that intersect this blue cylinder with the red curve is that I want to take the current of integration on the red curve and intersect it with the blue cylinder. Okay, so I take the current of integration on the blue cylinder, intersect with the current on the red curve, and I get what I want. Okay, so let me be more explicit. What I'm saying, okay, I know that this is not exactly a proof, but I hope that in some sense you can be convinced with this algebraic manipulation, is that if you take SC2 star of x, so this is what was in red, the red curve, you intersect it. So intersecting means I make the wedge product with the blue cylinder, and this is the current of integration on the blue cylinder, and this gives you the Poincaré series. And here I put an exponential minus st just to say that every time I will intersect the two currents, I put exponential of minus s of L gamma. And so now I have changed the representation of this sum of exponential minus s of L gamma into this somehow complicated expression. Okay.
Gabriel, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Doesn't this expression have signs in it corresponding to orientations where you were counting
yes,
it out?
Exactly. That's a good point. There are signs because when you intersect currents, you should have plus or minus one, and you have to take care of this. But because of negative curvature, it's always the same sign. So it will be, you have to do the computation. It's not obvious, but thanks using the negative curvature properties, you find that every time it will intersect with the same sign. So, but yes, there is an issue here to be sure that you do not put plus or minus depending on. Okay, so now what I want to do is to let t tends to infinity. So let me still be formal. If I let t goes to infinity, I have integral from 0 to infinity of exponential minus st phi minus t star and this iota v. And phi minus t star, the pullback by the flow, is nothing else than exponential of minus t LV. Okay, and now you start to understand why I speak about that at some spectral geometry seminar, is that we recognize some resolvent operator here. Okay, and what we find, at least formally, and if it makes sense, okay, if it makes sense, we find that the Poincaré series, it can be rewritten as the current of integration on SC2 star of x, wedge product iota v, LV plus S minus 1 applied to SC1 star of x. Okay, so now what we need to understand is that if these things make sense, okay, But we are in a good position because now we have turned the problem of proving the meromorphic continuation into trying to understand if there is a meromorphic continuation for this operator, and if so, can we apply this current? Can we apply it to this current and then pair it against this current? Okay, so it's not an easy thing to do, but we have changed the problem into a spectral problem that can be worked out. And hopefully for us, this problem has been studied by many people. Okay, so trying to understand the meromorphic continuation of this resolvent. Okay, so let me explain. So now I will turn to that. So this is so now I have this expression, and so all is about trying to understand if I can make sense of the meromorphic continuation of the right-hand side. Okay, so this is what I'm saying here. I need to understand if I can make, in some sense, the meromorphic continuation of this operator when it acts on singular objects. Okay, so here the object is singular because you see it's just integrating along a curve. So it's a Dirac along some curve. And so you have to be careful on what you should do. And so our theorem, the part one of our theorem about meromorphic continuation, it's all about understanding if in some sense, the spectral resolvent, when it acts on some good Banach space of currents, so meaning good Banach space that will allow us to deal with this kind of curve, can we make the meromorphic continuation on this Banach space? And it's all about that. Okay, it's and as I said, it's a topic that has been well studied. And so what we have to do is to try to see if the works of all these people who have worked on that can help us. So let me just try to review briefly what was done. So, okay, so this is what is called transfer operator in dynamical system, or what is referred also the spectrum of this kind of operator is referred as Polycott-Ruel spectrum. And it has been, as I said, studied by many people. And here it's important that you are on a negatively curved surface or manifold in more general. And what people did is that they introduced some spaces of anisotropic, let's say, Sobolev regularity. So they introduced some space of distribution made of distribution with Sobolev regularity, which is anisotropic. And they showed that for such spaces, this resolvent makes sense. Okay, so let me just show you a picture. It has been studied, as I said, by a lot of people, starting, let's say, from the work of Ruel in the 70s. And then it has been studied by many people in the dynamical system community. So you can see Polycott, Paris, Baladi, Liverani, Tsuji, Rug, and many others. And so these people introduce some functional framework where you can treat this problem, okay? And so, as I said, there are several approaches. Let's say the approach around Liverani is about using Hölder spaces. And maybe 15 years ago, Baladi and Tsuji, they introduced spaces. They started to use Fourier analysis to deal with this kind of problem. So not for flows, but for diffeomorphism. And then afterwards, as you can see from this picture, those of you who are in the micro-local community, you can recognize many people from micro-local analysis that started to work on this topic because they realized that you can use tools from micro-local analysis to define the appropriate spaces where this resolvent makes sense. And so I think for flows, it started with the work of Faure and Jostron that you can see here. And then it was pursued by Dyatlov and Zworsky and many others, Dyatlov and Guillermo. And they prove that they describe exactly what are the good spaces where you can make the meromorphic continuation of this resolvent. And good for us, it turns out that in the end, the only thing we need to do is just to check that this SC star of X, this curve, it lies into these spaces, and that we can make sense of this product. Okay, but as I said, the hard work was to prove this meromorphic continuation. And then there is some extra work, of course, to do, but you can do it, is to show that you can apply this result in our framework. And so, as I said, there are several approaches. So I will not discuss all the details, but there are, as I said, many people who have been working on that. And the approach that we follow, of course, is because we are more from this micro-local analysis community, is that we use this approach for micro-local analysis. And in the end, because, for instance, Dyatlov and Zworsky, they proved they were able to compute the wavefront set of the resolvent of LV plus S minus 1. We just have to make some computation about the wavefront set of our current and check that everything works well. Okay, but this is how we deal with meromorphic continuation of Poincaré series. Okay, so in summary, what we have is that we have this Poincaré series. We transform everything into estimating some resolvent, and then we need to check that this resolvent makes sense with our objects. Okay, and so I will not say more about this meromorphic continuation and this anisotropic Banach spaces, because it would be like a 1 hour talk about explaining the details. And I prefer to explain to you how you can compute the spatial value at 0. Okay, but if you have any question about this part, you just let me know, and I will be happy to answer. Okay. Okay, so the behavior at S equal to 0. So again, we will make use of the fact that we have expressed everything in a spectral way. Okay, so now our Poincaré series, we forget about the first expression and we focus on the new expression involving this resolvent. Okay, and so if you want to understand the behavior at S equal to 0, you need to understand if there is an eigenvalue, a pole at S equal to 0, and what this pole looks like. Okay, and as I said in my theorem, I don't want to have I'm saying that there is no pole in my theorem at S equal to 0. So I have to explain how to remove this pole. And so to do that, so you need to describe the spectral projector at S equal to 0. And this was done by Dyatlov and Zworsky when they studied what I mentioned, the Ruel zeta function, and they study its value at S equal to 0. They wanted to also, for similar reason, to describe the spectral projector at S equal to 0. Okay, and so they analyzed precisely this spectral projector. And here it's really important that we are in dimension 2. In higher dimension, the situation is much more complicated. Okay, or at least it's much less clear for the moment. Okay, so what you have, so what they prove, among other things, is that first that there is no Jordan blocks. Okay, so that this is really at S equal to 0, you have pi 0, which is the spectral projector divided by S plus some holomorphic remainder. But besides that, they prove that the range of pi 0, it can be expressed in terms of topological data. So it means that what they prove is that they describe the range of pi 0 in terms of generators of de Rham cohomology. Okay, so in some sense, except for one vector which is related to the contact form, they prove that all the eigenvectors associated to the eigenvalue 0 are closed one form, okay, are close to form. Okay, so this is our close one form. Okay, so this is something that we will use, okay, to study our spectra, to study our value at 0. So what we have to do is to check that when we apply S pi 0 to SC1 star of x, it will be 0. Okay, but to do that, we are helped with the fact that we know that the range of pi 0 only consists of generators, or can be described using generators of the Durham cohomology. Okay, so, and working a little bit, and in fact, using the fact that SC star of x is exact, so this is not obvious for the moment, but I will explain that in a couple of slides. We can show that pi 0 of SC star of x is equal to 0. Okay, and now you can play, so what you have is that the value is 0, as there is no spectral projector, I can write it formally like that. IV of LV minus 1 applied to SC1 star of x, multiply wedge product with SC2 star of x. Okay, so this is the way to see the value at 0. And now let me explain how you can dig out the Euler characteristic from that. So I will do exactly the same game as before, but in a different way, okay? I just write that SC star of x, now it is equal to LV minus 1 LV, okay? Because I said that pi 0 is equal to 0 on SC star of x. Now D commutes with LV, so it commutes with LV minus 1. So I can put the D here, okay? Okay, so again, this is a formal calculation. You have to justify things, but let's say I can do that. I'm just trying to explain the idea. So D applied to SC star of x, this is 0. And so I end up with SC star of x is D of something. And this something is exactly the thing that we have inside the integral here. Okay? So what I'm saying here is that the value at 0 is just SC2 star of x wedge product with some primitive of SC1 star of x. Okay, and now I'm coming to my linking of knots. Okay, so I have a curve and I have something such that D of this something is my curve. So what I want to think about this as a kind of surface whose boundary would be this curve. Okay. Okay, so this is what I'm saying in this slide is that the value at 0 is just given by SC2 star of x wedge this primitive. And I want to think of this primitive as a surface whose boundary is SC star of x. So it turns out that it is not exactly true. Okay, but this is not exactly like that. Okay, but this is where I started to speak about nodes. Okay, so here, so I did not explain yet that SC star of x is equal to, okay, so I explained it, but I use at some point that SC star of x was exact, but I did not really justify it. But let's say that you have this expression, and I have that if I take the contact form and make the wedge product with SC star of x, this is 0. And this is exactly the definition of being a Legendrian knot. So it means that the curve is in the tangent space to the curve is in the kernel of the contact form. And it means that the curve is exact in Durham cohomology. Okay, this is the definition of a Legendrian knot. And what I'm saying here is that this integral here is the linking between these two curves. So let me show you the picture so that it is clear. I have SC2 star of x here, which was the red curve from before. And now I have SC1 star of x as a primitive, and this primitive is R of C1. Okay. And so what I want to show you in this picture, which is a little bit misleading, is that this blue surface so would be represented by R of C1. And so the linking number would correspond to the number of intersection points between this curve and this surface. So this is what we want to think about the linking between two curves, is that you put this blue surface and you count how many times it intersects the curve SC2 star of X intersect this surface. But unfortunately, it is not exactly the case. It is not an integer, but it is 1 over chi of X. Okay, 1 over the Euler characteristic. Okay, and the reason for that is that if you want SC star 1 of X to be the boundary of some surface, you have to turn around SC1 star of X chi of X time, and not just one time. So it's a little bit hard to represent, but believe me, this is how it works.
Gabriel, so it,
yes,
what you are saying, it doesn't depend on C1 and C2?
Yeah, it does not depend on C1 and C2. This quantity, you can check that it is independent of C1 and C2, except if C1 is equal to C2, you have to be careful. But for C1 different from C2, this is independent.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now let me just try to explain to you, because it's a little bit mysterious like that, to say, okay, he has done some computation. It looks like the linking of something, but he finds minus 1 over chi of X. So let me try to explain you the trick to find this number. Okay, so how to compute this linking number? And so this is something that we were helped by Baptiste Chantraine and Jean-Yves Velchinger, who help us with this computation. So these are colleagues who are topologists, and when we ask them, they solve the problem in super fast. So let me explain to you how you prove such a result, which apparently is maybe classical, but not so easy to find in the literature. Okay, so what you do is you suppose that C1 is not equal to C2, and you take a Morse function with all its critical points that are distinct from C1. Okay, and now you want to find a surface in S star of X whose boundary is SC star of X. So it turns out that it is not possible to do exactly that, but you can do as follows. You take all the points which are not critical, and then you take the gradient of F, and that you normalize. So it means that above each point, you take the gradient of F and you normalize. So when you will reach a critical point, your vector field will will turn around this critical point. And by Stokes' formula, you can check that ds is equal to minus the sum over all the critical points of minus 1 to the index of A, S A star of X. So what this calculation shows you first is that S A star of X, you can check that all these curves are equivalent up to some boundary, okay? And in fact, it shows that S A star of X is exact, as I said. So this is correct. And now let me show you the linking number. So this is as follows. So you have SC star 1 of X, and you intersect with this surface, which is just above each point, you take one vector, which is the gradient. So it will, this curve and this surface, they will only intersect one time. So this will give 1. Okay, so now SC1 star of X is D of RC1. Okay, so what you can do is just apply Stokes' formula and put D here. But now D of S is something that we have computed. We say that this surface, it has been created so that the boundary of this surface is the union of the fibers SA star of X. And so we can write this, what is the boundary of S, and we find that this is minus the sum of our critical points of minus 1 to a power index of A. And this is the quantity we are looking for. And you can make a small calculation to verify that this is independent of A and C1. And this is exactly the Euler characteristics. And so we are done. Okay, so we have on this side the Euler characteristic, on this side the linking, which is independent of A. In fact, you can check that this is independent of A. And so we find that the Euler characteristic, the linking between C1 and C2 is -1 divided by the Euler characteristic. Okay. Okay, so in summary, what we have shown is that we have shown that the Poincaré series can be expressed in terms of some spectral data. Then we have looked at its value at 0, and we have shown that I have explained that using some result on the spectral projector at 0, we are able to show that this value at 0 is in fact some linking between two curves. And then there is a topological issue, which is to compute this linking number. Okay. And now I'm in good position to answer Dima's question about a more general problem with Poincaré series. And so what you can imagine is that you take C1 to be a geodesic and C2 to be a point, and you want to look at all the geodesics that are orthogonal to C1 and that go to C2. Okay? And you have the same kind of result by Margulis theorem. In fact, it was not exactly proved by Margulis, but by Parkkonen and Paulin proved that you have a similar asymptotic on the number of geodesics that are orthogonal to C1 and that reach C2. You can make things even more complicated. You can be orthogonal to C1 and orthogonal to C2. Okay? And all this, you can put it in the same box. Okay, try to do exactly the same thing. Okay, so now what I'm doing is that I take two elements in pi1, in the fundamental group of X, and I take C1 and C2 to be their geodesic representative. Okay. Okay, so, and I want to look at the geodesic arcs that go from C1 to C2 and that are orthogonal to both curves. Okay, and when the curve is a point, being orthogonal means being any point above C1. And as you can guess, we can in fact prove exactly the same theorem in this setting. And this is the main statement, is that you take this general framework, you take C1 and C2 be some geodesic representative of some conjugacy class. You form the Poincaré series, the sum over exponential minus S of L gamma. And what you can prove is that this function, which is holomorphic for real part of S larger than the topological entropy, it has a meromorphic continuation to the whole complex plane. And exactly the same thing, if you suppose that C1 and C2 are trivial in homology, or in cohomology, the one should be on the top, you have that chi of X times the value at 0 is an integer. Okay? And in that case, again, it can be interpreted as the linking between two curves. And the two curves, they are the conormal bundles to C1 and C2. So you take C1, you take all the vectors which are normal, directly normal to C1. So this is the direct conormal bundle to C1. You take the direct conormal bundle to C2. If C1 and C2 are trivial in homology, they are trivial. This gives rise to two curves in S star of X, which are also trivial in de Rham cohomology. And you can show that their linking number is in fact the value at 0 of a Poincaré series. And so this is the main result. So I wanted to start with points because I hope that it was simpler to present. But this is in fact the result in its full generality. And the proof works exactly the same, except that, of course, computing this integer here is much more involved. Before it was 1 or -1, I don't remember, it was 1. And if you want to compute it in the more general case, it's much more subtle, but you can still try to do that. Okay. And just, so maybe I will skip this. No, maybe I should say that. So if the two curves are closed geodesics, I said that it was the linking of the conormal bundles, but in fact, it sounds a little bit complicated. And it is exactly the same thing as looking at the linking number of the closed geodesic in S star of X. Okay, so and you have similar result in for Dirichlet series, for instance, in some works of Duke, Imamoglu, and Toff on the modular surface. They show that the linking number between two closed geodesic appear at some special value of Dirichlet series. Okay, and similarly for suspension of toral automorphism, you have some result by Bergeron, Charolois, Garcia, and Venkatesh that linking numbers and special value of some zeta function. But here I want to insist that this is a result in variable negative curvature, no arithmetic inside what I said today. Okay, and there is some explicit expression, but I want to skip that because it will not be helpful to see it. Okay, so in conclusion, what we can do is that in fact, we can prove a meromorphic continuation using this spectral approach in any dimension. Okay, we do not need to be on a surface to prove the meromorphic continuation. But in dimension 2, and here it's important to be in dimension 2, we are able to compute their value at 0, and it can be interpreted as some linking number between two curves. And in the case of 2 points, it is in fact just 1 over the Euler characteristic. As I said, in the arithmetic framework, you have similar phenomena. I cannot tell you the relation with this result, but probably they are. And of course, a good question would be to answer what is going on in higher dimension. And probably there is a pole in when the dimension is odd. And this is the reason for that is you can use the formula due to Parternin and prove it in higher dimension. And you see that if the manifold has odd dimension, there is a pole at S equal to 0. And of course, what would be interesting is to see in constant negative curvature what can be extracted using the relation between Poincaré series and the spectral decomposition of the Laplace. Okay, and I think I will stop here and thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for this talk. I think we have some time for questions now. So if anybody has questions, you can unmute yourself to ask them.
So it's Alex. I have easy to ask, but probably doesn't mean I understand what I'm saying, but I want to ask it anyways.
Yes.
In your condition, you have that the two curves are homologically trivial or cohomologically trivial.
Mm-hmm.
And you did not list in your questions what happens if the two curves are not homologically trivial. Is it? Do you have ideas on that?
No, probably there is a pole, but we are not able. It would be interesting to describe the residue at the pole, maybe, but we are not able to do that.
Okay. So presumably it would still contain some topological information, but
not so sure, not so sure,
okay.
not so sure. But as I said, the value at 0 would be related to the spectral projector, and the spectral projector it encodes some topological data. So, but not clear what you will get from that. Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for Gabriel?
I have sort of two silly questions. Can it be related to the work of Svetlana Katok and like Tatiana Foth and Baron, because they thought a lot about Poincare series, probably in constant curvature, right?
So I don't know this work, but maybe. But so which work is it by Svetlana Katok and
Tatiana Foth, Tatiana Baron? I'll send you the. And okay, so I'll send you some references. And another question, so for example, if you have geodesic loops, right, it could be interesting to also look at the angles of intersection.
The angles of intersection, yes, that's right. That's right.
Like self-intersect, or if you look for geodesics from C1 to C2, you could choose a direction at C1, a direction at C2. And so in your generating function, right, you could somehow, if you make you could look at the intersection, at the angles of that the curves from C1 to C2 make with given directions, right? So, and then somehow put that into your generating function, maybe make it complex valued, like
maybe you would have probably to define some sector and to say, okay, for the angles that lie in this sector, maybe you can say something.
I mean, I've seen it right in some works on dynamical systems where people look at self-intersections of geodesics or intersections of geodesics on the base, and there they count, they look at these angles and compute it's related to some measure. So, yeah, I'm wondering if,
maybe, I don't know. Maybe there is something to do, but at least if you want to prescribe some interval of angles that where you want to intersect, probably you can do something, but you have to be careful. I'm not 100% sure. Okay.
I'd like to make a remark about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a whole tradition in automorphic forms that starts with Hans Petersen about looking at precisely the same Poincare series you're discussing, but starting in the 30s. He started off with holomorphic forms and then did C-infinity Mas forms, and it led to Kuznetsov formulas in the late 70s, early 80s, where effectively, let me try to put this into a context. You know how Gilliman invented a flat trace formula?
Yes.
Gabrielle, are you there? So Gilliman invented a flat trace formula, which people have kind of worked on quite a lot to give a special meaning for it. So he, basically pointed out that you can take the trace of the geodesic flow in the unit sphere bundle by looking at the Schwartz kernel, that's a delta function at x minus the flow at y, and then integrating it over the diagonal. And what effectively you're doing that's related to what you're doing here, you don't integrate it over the diagonal, integrate x over one curve and y over the other curve.
Yes,
now,
yes,
if you do that, you're going to get a sum over, you're going to get a sum. You can break, if your curves are closed geodesics, then exactly as in Petersen, you break it up into double cosets, or in Kuznetsov formulas, right? You break things up into double cosets, and you're going to get a sum over the double cosets, and you're going to get double coset invariance. These are what are called sojourn rays by Gilliman, who also pointed this out for Eisenstein's series in a paper of his. If you do this, you don't quite get the same zeta function that you're writing down. You get the same zeta function that is divided by a certain constant, which can be interpreted as kind of a scattering cross-section between these two things. So it's not quite exactly the same zeta function, but it gives you kind of a large generalization. Using this resolvent formula, you can justify, you're taking the Laplace transform of the Gilliman flat trace, or Gilliman, we call it Kuznetsov sum, because you're not doing it over the diagonal. You're doing it over the pair of closed curves. And you will get meromorphic continuation for that zeta function, which is somewhat different from yours because of these extra double coset invariants weighting the different terms. But nevertheless, it sort of suggests other things you can do with the same formula.
No, but in fact, it's in your paper, for instance, with the Kuznetsov formula, it's indeed the same thing. You look at the spectral projector and you want to pair it against a submanifold and look at.
Yeah, that's right. We were working on the Laplace operator side rather than pure dynamical systems. So if you're working in constant curvature, they're the same. But if you're not working in constant curvature, they're really quite different, as you very well know. By the way, I might mention that if you want to tilt the angle so you don't get orthogonals to the curves, then what you do is you try to look at Fourier coefficients, which are non-zero Fourier coefficients. You have to integrate them against certain Fourier coefficients along the curves, and you choose the Fourier coefficients in such a way that you can tilt the angles.
Hmm.
So these are called Kloosterman sums, these sort of
Hmm.
kinds of things in the literature.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you very much, Steve, for this contribution. I think we may have time for one more question if there's someone who has one.
Maybe I can ask a quick question, Gabriel.
Yeah,
So this
yes.
was for the orientable case, yes?
Yes.
So what about the non-orientable case? There was recent analysis of pi zero. Do you expect
Yeah.
a similar answer in that case?
Yeah, but as it was already quite hard to write it in the orientable case, but
Okay.
yes, I expect that anytime you would have nice information on the spectral projector at zero, you
Yeah,
would expect something.
Shushen and Bonsoir,
Yeah.
you probably know. Mhm.
Yeah, I know that. And also for the case with boundary, in fact, Chauvet, who is a student of Guillermo, he has extended the formula with 2 points. He has extended the formula for surfaces with boundary.
Okay.
So yeah. Anytime you have, for instance, it would be interesting to see at this paper with Sekic, Dyatlov, Kuster, Paternin. They have good information about the spectral projector in higher dimension, and to see what is going on using
But
this
then it's
kind of
somehow
thing.
non-topological. Somehow I remember something weird happened in
Ye-
3 dimensions.
Yeah, but they prove that if you do some generic perturbation, it is somehow topological. So the case of constant curvature seems to be special, and then so I don't know, but yes, all this would be interesting.
Yeah, lots of developments possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and let's thank again Gabriel for this talk. We will reconvene next week, same time for a talk by Philippe Charon from Technion.